theater gives you a sense of play that you can explore the boundaries, the limits of what you can do, and you can do it playfully, of course. That is not for real, and but then you thereby you engage with actuality, with real life, and propose alternative visions or dreams, as if you want to put it that way. So that was my training at the National School of Drama in New Delhi for about 4 years and 1+1 year. When I returned in Bangladesh, the context seemed out of place. Why should I be doing theater? Theater seems so much for people who had enough to eat and live, and most of the people in Bangladesh at that time were very poor at that time in 1979 and 80. Things are much better now. If you look into the rural area, it's much better now. Bangladesh outperforms India even in certain areas. But that was a time when the theater seemed to be a luxury. So the only way I could explain my engagement in theater was to engage with this reality. And I think this has been a very major reason that no pastime is just a pastime that you do either for you earn money or for your fame. You engage with any work in life, maybe because of this existentialist streak that I had earlier, to make your life meaningful. And to make your life meaningful by means of theater, because that's the only skill I had developed, would be to engage with the people in some ways or the other. So the kind of theater that I devised in the 80s were really very expensive. And I really was looking for a way to move closer to the people, as it were, or to address the economic problems that we had. In 1987-88, when I was a student at the University of Warwick, I had this very good fortune of interacting with Clive Barker, a very good teacher and Marxist, and not an elitist, not an skip upper left lip British person. Very open, and he never let me call him Mr. or Professor or Sir. So it was always Clive. And with Clive, I discovered theater for development at that time. Theater for development in the 80s, I'm talking of 1987 when I started engaging with it, was heavily dominated by African experience. There's very little in Asia, and there was some in Latin America, of course, from where you have Augusto Boal and, more importantly, Paulo Freire. Now, when I read Paulo Freire, it was, I mean, my world was re-visioned. I re-engaged, re-understood what education is. And when I engaged with with Augusto Boal, I could see that how Freire's notion of education as freedom, education as access for freedom, could be translated in terms of theater. And that really shaped, that really was a game changer for me. It shaped my cognitive approach to the world, my way I understood the world, the way I engaged with the world. So when I returned to Bangladesh in '89, I began working with a company, with a left-leaning political party, who worked at the grassroots level. But glasnost was afoot, and Soviet Union would soon fall. So the Marxist parties were really were quite at shambles, and nothing much happened there. So in '91, I engaged with an INGO. And there I had a wonderful opportunity of exploring Paulo Freire, Augusto Boal, and especially not exactly forum theater, but simultaneous dramaturgy. So with simultaneous dramaturgy, we toured a number of places and in rural areas, and it also gave me an opportunity to engage with the people. There are two learning experiences. At one place, at one time, where I was just performing, this question of masculinity and a husband's right over a woman's body came up, because this woman had gone over to this doctor when the husband wasn't at home, and this male doctor had examined her, and she was pregnant. And of course, the husband was furious when he returned. So we had a wonderful discussion, and I played as a Boalian joker here, and it was great. Gradually, women began to open up, and we had a fascinating discourse coming up. The problem was at one point somebody, produced this Islamic thumbker that in Islam it says you can do this and you can't do that. And I wasn't prepared at that time. My reading of Quran was not extensive enough at that time to come up with a counter argument that what else is there also in the Quran. So usually it happens that, you know, the Quran is played up as a masculine strategy, forgetting that also in the Quran there are also places where you can counter those masculine strategies for other ends. I failed at that time, and it didn't work. But more importantly, what didn't work then in future roles, future engagements that I saw, were that these NGOs were really engaging with these pieces of workshop that I was doing with them because an INGO was funding it. If the funding stopped, they would stop working. So there was not this ideological commitment. By ideology, I mean whatever. It can be Islamist ideology, it can be capitalist ideology, it can be left-leaning ideology, but it is your structure of thought. It is your commitment to a notion of whatever truth, quote unquote, or whatever holy, or whatever good, or whatever ethically just or right you. So there was none of that, and it was for money, and that really broke my ideals about, or dreams about theatre for development and later on applied theatre. But I take heart that when I initiated this course at our department at the University of Dhaka, and there I saw my students in '94 really excited, getting excited over Boolean Freudian notions of education. And that was very good. And later on at the university, we had some workshops and we had some performances. And then I realized that, you see, when we are engaging with applied theatre, it is always for them, never for us. At the university, we did it for us. We did it for the students. We did it for the teachers. We raised problems that the students have about the teachers, including sexual harassment. And it was deeply disturbing for many. But then you see, when we're doing it for us and we are discussing within us, it made more sense than, you know, going on an evangelical trip to somebody else's doorstep and preaching to them. I think that is my deepest concern about applied theatre and the way applied theatre works. And because the money comes from Europe, from the North, it is inevitable that somehow or the other, that European strategies, European notions, right now, neoliberalism slips in. You can't avoid it. And that is what I argue here. It is not that I'm against applied theatre. It is that I had dreams about applied theatre and I can't see ways of getting out. I have one or two papers. Even here, I have a strategy, if that strategy works. It could be a kind of dream. It could be that maybe it is never possible. Because to engage in applied theatre anyway, you need funding. Now, if you have to get the funding from any possible place, it is either the government or the NGOs. They are the NGOs. They will have their own strategies. They'll have their own ends to meet. They have their own goals to meet. So unless you fulfill those goals, you don't get the funds. And usually those goals meet the North, or the nation states of the North, and their interest, not our interest, mostly. And this is what I argue here too, that right now, and then towards the end now, earlier it was different, but now, the 21st century, it is neoliberalism that is at work. I define what neoliberalism is, and I'll take the questions one by one. If there are any questions now, or I can move in straight to my paper. Briefly, what I was trying to explain is why applied theatre was very important to me, why it is still important for me. And at one level, it is not to earn money. Let's be very clear. I would not engage in applied theatre to earn money. I would not engage in applied theatre to do good to others, you know, to be somebody, a hero who can rescue others. So these deep-seated notions are very problematic. That I see people engaging in applied theatre because you try to be a good Samaritan and you try to help others, you try to rescue others. That is problematic. I think I would like to engage in applied theatre because of the Freudian notion, because it teaches me, first of all, It teaches me, and I'm prepared to debunk my ideological position in this dialogue that I engage in. So by means of the dialogue, if applied theater is finally a dialogue, where you're equal partners, which doesn't happen, unfortunately, even in Boolean strategies, because there you have the joker, and the joker can outmaneuver whatever strategies you have. The joker is never neutral, is what I mean. So if you have an applied theater where you really, power relations don't work, the north versus south, where you really have an open-ended agenda, where you really can take up any issue, regardless of who is bringing it up, even if it is an Islamist issue, even if it is an issue that hurts, so-called hurts Donald Trump. If you're willing to do that, I'm willing to partner in that. But that would mean, taking up issues or taking up children, say, of the IS. So are we prepared to do an applied theater in dealing with what we do with these children of IS jihadists who have died? So applied theater is deeply problematic at that, because deep-seated, I see anywhere that there's a deep-seated notion that we from the north are coming to save you. And that becomes a huge problem for me. Now, would you like to comment now, or shall we take the questions at the end, and shall I move on to my paper?
Do folks have any questions initially from this opening piece?
Or we can take it at the end.
Yeah.
But whatever I said, I'm not trying to other it. Please understand. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking from a position where it hurts to have seen what I've seen. Mm-hmm. And it hurts because, I speak up, I call a spade a spade. Mm-hmm. And I welcome you to do the same thing to me. But then, let us not be polite and, sort of pat each other's back that we are doing good jobs, and we are kind of very good Samaritans and happy kind of people. Okay, I'll move on to my PowerPoint presentation. I take it that you have all read the piece, so it shouldn't be very difficult. I'll just move in quickly. All my points are also given. And so this is the title, and yours truly. The structure of the paper really moves in, you have read it. It first of all locates Rupantar and its recreated indigenous ethics of Podgan in the context of climate change threats in Bangladesh. So this is the contextual, the context that you need to know before you move into the third part, which is the most important part. The second part, what the second part does is it examines how Rupantar's Podgan is devised and performed to serve as an interventionist tool to challenge climate change. So how the devising process is discussed, and then I discover this gets theoretical, uncovers the slippage of Rupantar's practice under neoliberalism and the consequent emergence of applied theatrics. How, despite the best of intentions, Rupantar's Podgan invariably slips under, becomes a hostage of, if you will, neoliberalism. Then of course, it enlarged the scope of the examination from the local, from Bangladesh perspective, to global, to present a meta-discourse on intervention, neoliberalism, and performance. Right, so first part is quite simple, really. Rupantar literally means transformation. The term Rupantar, the name of the organization, the NGO, it means transformation. Okay, it's a non-government organization, NGO, based in Khulna. This is southwestern Bangladesh. This is an NGO. It asserts that culture and sustainable development are closely connected. Very few NGOs in Bangladesh do this, and very few NGOs in the world do this. But they assert that culture and sustainable development are closely connected. So in order to engage in sustainable development, they mobilize culture. It runs development programs that affect lives of approximately 26% of the entire population of Bangladesh. So it has a huge outreach. It is funded by government of Bangladesh and as well as intergovernmental organization, IGOs, and international non-governmental organizations, INGOs. It receives a lot of funds also. So its mission, and these two, among others, it has other missions, but these two missions are important for our discussion. One is to resuscitate, develop, and foster folk cultural forms and methods to sensitize grassroots people. And the second mission for us, important for us, is to build people's capacity to cope with the impacts of climate change and natural disaster, to conserve natural biodiversity. I will argue that the second mission is jeopardized. Now, this is the background. This is what Rupantar has taken the indigenous theatric that we have. This is a traditional performance, which is called pot gun. It is also known as Potua gun. It is, they are really sung narratives, visually illustrated with scroll painting. And you see here, the scroll is vertical. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 4 rows of three panels, 12 panels at the top, and 4 rows of 3 panels. Again, 12 panels at the bottom, and the central panel. This is a pot of Ghazi Gan, a pir, a semi-mythical, legendary figure, a Muslim figure who's beneficial agent who will help people. Now, this is a vertical arrangement, and this man sings and points to various panels as he sings in order to illustrate the singing. So what Rupantar has done is successfully recreated, restored, and adapted the indigenous theatrics of Potgan to meet the challenge of climate change in Bangladesh, but in the process, of course, it slips under neoliberalism. That I'll argue later on. But Rupantar's process of adaptation, restoration, and recreation began on 5th June 1996. That's when they began, until 2014, when I completed my second field work with them. It had produced 137 productions, which have performed 10,396 times for 10.7 million spectators. This is a huge figure. Now, you'll see here, I'll play a short scroll, short video clip. You'll see here at the background, you see the scroll. Now here the scroll is horizontal, it's unfurled. 2 people hold it and it is unfurled, and this woman will swing it and will use the baton and point at various panels to illustrate her argument. And this, what she is arguing here is migration, how people are trapped in migration. When people from Bangladesh migrate abroad, they are trapped by the various middlemen, and how they should be careful. This is the best performance piece that I could find. So, but it'll give you an idea of how Rupantar performs Potgun. that is clear, and I hope you've seen the background scroll being unfurled. But I can take it up later on if you have questions. Now, for the background that we are studying, this is our climate change. This is Bangladesh. India is on all three sides, and a bit of Myanmar at this end. And you can see the rivers. It's a riverine country. A hydraulic civilization. Many people have called it a hydraulic because of its hydrometeorological features. And these hydrometeorological features are very important for Bangladesh. Extensive, it is really, this land is extensive alluvial floodplain at the confluence of three immense rivers, the Ganges, Padma, Brahmaputra, Yamuna, and Meghna. So this is the Padma or the Ganges Padma, and this is the Brahmaputra, Yamuna, and this is the Meghna. And Bangladesh is really at the confluence of these three mighty rivers. It is intersected by over 200, there are over 200 rivers. It experiences humid and subtropical climate. It receives 1,600 millimeter to 2,300 millimeter rain between June and September, and is susceptible to range of climate risks, including severe floods, tornadoes, tidal bores, and droughts. Now, if you look at this, this is visually Bangladesh and climate change. The map here on the top left corner, you'll see that red zones are very susceptible to sea level risks because they're about 5 meters of height, 5 meters from sea level, only 5 meters, all these red places. And the yellow is only 12 meters. So hugely susceptible to climate change. And this image really speaks all. And this is how land erosion, river erodes even land and takes off the homesteads even, leaving people absolutely pauper. Now, but importantly, it is important to remember that Bangladesh contributes only less than 3.6% of total global emission. But it is ranked 6th on the Global Climate Risk Index in 2017 and 25th least ready country to reduce climate change effects. If you compare this to, say, Amsterdam, you'll see that where you have floating houses and stills in residential areas, as this image shows, the Netherlands is also low-lying delta, but it has a financial, scientific, and technological capacity to build higher sea walls and look for options like the image shows. But for Bangladesh, poverty operates in a vicious circle compared to Netherlands. We are definitely poor, and for poverty generates further poverty. Now, this is how I define neoliberalism, and I will repeatedly show how neoliberalism undercuts the work of Rupantar, as Rupantar engages with climate change. Now, neoliberalism is concerned with institutional changes ushered by the core tenets of Chicago School of Economics, which are privatization, deregulation, and cuts to government services. And by Chicago School of Economics, I mean that which originated at the University of Chicago in 1930s. The main tenets were free markets, best allocate resources in an economy, and minimal or even no government intervention is best for economic prosperity. Of course, Donald Trump is overriding all these factors in various ways. But then neoliberalism also insists that underpinned by the ideology, neoliberalism is also underpinned by the ideology that is generated from the daily life experience of buying and selling commodities, because the ideology that it promotes, that the image of the society is really this experience of buying and selling of commodities. As a political project, it tries to render the social domain economic and to link reduction in welfare state services and security system to increasing call for personal responsibility and self-care. And that's important. So your neoliberalism would insist that there should be no government intervention, and that the government should only provide a level playing field where everybody has the equal opportunity, but there should be no safety net like Obamacare or any kind of health safety nets for people to access, because that would be unfair. And so there will be no welfare state services. People will, it'll imbibe people for personal responsibility and self-care. So you take care of yourself and it is your responsibility to take care of yourself. But of course, the state gives you, or at least supposedly gives you, a level playing field. It asserts that the market is in human nature, and that is valid, I think, because that it'll assert that any kind of social system, it is not that human beings extend hands to help each other out. It'll insist that it is you calculate in terms of market value as to whether you want to, whatever you do, how beneficial it is for you. So thereby you're moving drastically away from all the kind of humanist ideals that you project, or any kind of socialist or visions, or any kind of social welfare that you may have. Moving on to second phase, and here I argue, I explain how Rupantar devises the thought gun. Of course, it has this very important that this works ideally, but in effect, as this will answer one of your questions, in effect, this is not put into practice. They cannot put this into practice. They said that this is their ideal situation. The ideal situation is field level research conducted at the area where thought gun performances to serve as an awareness campaign. So the development workers of Rupantar would engage in extensive field level research to understand, to gather detailed information on the mental makeup of the people, their economic condition, existing social, human, and environmental problems that they face. They also collect data from government and non-government organizations. Once this is done, once this is given, then they move into the director and the composer of the libretto of the thought gun production, and the performers and the field level development workers all investigate the past, the present, and the future state of the selected issue. This is important. They are not engaging into any kind of fairy and dialogue. It is they who understand. They would like to feel that they understand best. They engage in and you are into the economic condition, and then they devise, investigate the past, present, the future state of the selected issue that they would like to engage with these people, and then the composer, the director and the composer, they discuss this, and from this research they develop the message to be imparted through performance. And then the libretto is composed. The libretto is composed in 6 parts. First part is thematic exposition. What you heard really was part of the thematic exposition. Then the problem and its cause is presented in the second part. The third part, how the problem proliferates. The fourth part, consequences caused by the initial problem. Fifth part, how the problem can be overcome. And the sixth part, what needs to be done. This is the structure. Based on the structure, the libretto is composed on the selected issue. For the musical score, popular folk tunes are usually chosen from the target region where it will be performed. So popular folk tunes are chosen, and then either the libretto is set or the tune is set to the libretto, vice versa, so that it works. Now this is not done in the indigenous theatres. In the indigenous Portugal or thought gun, you have one tune only, and there is not much of variety, and nothing of the dance that you saw in the performance clip that I showed you. And then the director and the painter of the stall start to visualize the 6 stages of the plot on the paper, and each of the 6 parts of the plot is illustrated with 4 panels in the frame. And you saw one of the panels, or you saw one of the frames. So you have one frame, one stall. The stall is unfurled to reveal a frame, and within the frame you have 4 panels illustrating one part of the plot that you have over there. Once the images are finalized, the performers begin the initial rehearsal. They get the songs ready, they rehearse the song and the libretto, and by that time the music has been set. The painter sets off to execute the image of the stall and to prepare the stall for the performance. When the stall is ready, the performers have prepared their songs. The libretto is ready. The director engages with everybody, and he determines the composition, the dance, the choreography, the movement. And then there's a test show at the project site. And then the amendments, they make necessary amendments based on feedback from the site. But there the feedback is given mostly by the rural elites or the people who are funding, or even the government organizations who are present. And then public performances begin. Once now if you understand the background, as I discussed in the first part, and how the pod gun performances are created, the device, as I've discussed now. Now I discuss how Rupantar slips under neoliberalism. And thereby, instead of apply Syed fix, you have fix K inserted into Syed fix. Rupantar's mission is, as it states, to build people's capacity to cope with the impacts of climate change and natural disaster and to conserve natural biodiversity. This is Rupantar's mission. But it seeks to effect Rupantar, that is transformation, through a top-down banking process, if you go by Paulo Freire. This is not dialogue. There is no room for Freirean dialogue as practice for freedom. It is not surprising because Rupantar states culture and sustainable development are closely connected, as culture can be used as a means for building awareness among people, especially among illiterate people. Now, instead of calling non-literate people, illiterate people term is used, which of course undermines. This is a skill. Literacy is a very important skill, but then you can call them non-literate. But this is the approach to their work. Hence, Rupantar disseminates necessary information and instructs the spectators as to what is to be done. Clear instructions are given to the spectators. Even post-performance feedback from the spectators is not deemed necessary. In actuality, even the field level research that I discussed earlier in part 2 is determined by the donor or tailored to fit the donor's agenda. Most of the time, their own, the devising process that they would like to follow is not even implemented. And in many cases, you do not have field level investigation. Consequently, Rupantar has to fit its podcast production to the needs of the donor. The case of in the case of Jalbayu Poribortan Podgun, this is the podgun which in translation would be podgun on climate change, specifically produced, specifically devised to deal with this issue of climate change. Its partner was CARE Bangladesh, which implemented Canadian CEDA funded project, and the project was titled Reduction of Vulnerability of Climate Change. So CEDA funded CARE, and CARE took up Rupantar as a partner for this project. The project's goal, reduction of vulnerability of climate change, the project's goal was to increase capacity of communities in the southwestern region of Bangladesh to adapt to the adverse effects of climate change, and it had a three-pronged approach: awareness building, action, and advocacy. Rupantar's Jalbayu Poribortan part was part of the awareness building campaign only. It had no part to play in the other two components of the project. It was implemented from 2002 to 2005 in 3 administrative districts. Now, a study was carried out, of course, before this project was implemented, knowledge, attitude, and behavior related to climate change. And that set the baseline awareness activities, baseline of what people are really aware. So that's a baseline. But then Rupantar played no part into it, part in it. It was played by, this was done by CARE Bangladesh. Rupantar was given this baseline awareness of activities, a baseline awareness. The data was provided to Rupantar, and it was only entrusted with the task of implementing specific component of awareness, and by producing this Jalbayu Poribortan Podgun, this is Podgun on climate change. So this Podgun on climate change served the donor by disseminating information on climate change and preparing the target audience to adapt to it. Now, you see, Rupantar here is only a cog in a giant development machine built and run by the INGOs. Here, of course, CEDA Bangladesh, to urge the people to adapt to climate change. And Podgun had nothing to say regarding the action or the advocacy components of the project. Consequently, even the top-down ranking process that Rupantar deems necessary in devising Podgun performance was not executed in this case. As the director of the Podgun ruefully acknowledges, donor intervention and imperatives dictates by availability of funding hardly ever makes it possible to devise Podgun as we would ideally like to. So they have to tailor according to the donor's needs and intentions and agenda. And this is something that if you engage with applied theater, you may have to, for securing funding in one way or the other. This may be an issue. As a cog in the development machine, Jalwayu Parivartan Podgan, the Podgan on climate change, serves an important function, of course. It urges the people not to be worried or blame themselves for their fate, but live with disasters arising out of climate change by adjusting to them. The slogan displayed at the end of the stall says, "Let us take initiatives to adjust ourselves to these disasters." Now, the price tag of this initiative is clearly this. The people, as individuals, have to assume key neoliberal imperative of assuming responsibility for these activities and possible failure thereof. So finally, they are made aware, and finally, they are responsible for whatever happens to their environment. It is here that Podgan serves neoliberal drive for personal responsibility and safety. So this is important, and this is what neoliberalism finally boils down to. It is your personal responsibility in this world. Instead of government safety nets or social care or social mobilization, you have to fend for yourself, and the self-care is more important. At the same time, the performance completely forgets the notion of mitigation of climate change. Now, of course, this is important. Climate change, whoever deals with climate change, this factor of mitigation, how can we mitigate the effects of climate change? But there is nothing in this Podgan that speaks of mitigation. It makes no mention of the historical burdens placed on the poor countries by the industrial countries, and these industrial countries are the main contributors of existing stock of greenhouse gases, but which also continue to emit at per capita rates that are manifold that of a poor country, which I mentioned earlier. But in 2017, Bangladesh was emitting less than 0.36% of global greenhouse gas compared to 24% by the United States. But Bangladesh will bear the responsibility more. And by the performances such as Podgan, it is finally those people in southwestern Bangladesh who are vulnerable the most to take care of themselves. Podgan maintains silence on this fact that Bangladesh emits only 0.36% of global greenhouse gas. There's no mention of this, and there's no mention of Kyoto Protocol to the United Nations Framework Conventions of climate change. Now, this is not surprising, because Kyoto Protocol states that the developed nations had pledged to reduce emissions by an average of 5% by the period 2008 to 12. Of course, this is debunked. This was not carried out. Canada has denounced the protocol, and the United States says it has no intention to ratify it ever. Hence, the CEDA-funded project, the Canadian CEDA-funded project, lays the responsibility on the people. And here you see how neoliberalism is at work. The Podgan performance bears its actual intent of operating as a neoliberal apparatus that relegates areas of social responsibility to a matter of personal provision. Jalwayu Parivartan Podgan also plays up the fear factor that the developed countries mobilize against underdeveloped countries in all negotiations. And this fear factor is this, that the most adverse effects of climate change will be on the developing countries. And therefore, it is in the interest of the developing countries to negotiate some kind of deal on climate change, because it is their future that is most at risk. So you accept a deal by compromising, of course. And CEDA plays up this fear factor. A transparent neoliberal agenda is made manifest as a political project here. What is at work is a new mode of governmentality, a manner or mentality in which people are governed, that is people of Bangladesh, or southwestern part of Bangladesh, and they are governed by themselves. And by governmentality, I borrow from Michel Foucault, where it means that it combines the term of government and rationality. So government is an activity meant to shape, guide, or affect the conduct of the people. So you don't really force people. So it is an activity. You do something that shapes, guides, or affects the conduct of the people. So there is no enforcement. There is no coercion. To expand this meaning, it would mean that the active consent and willingness of the individuals to participate in their own governance. So the people govern themselves. You don't have to dictate them. You don't have to mobilize any machinery on them. So, and my reading is most of Western democracies are really working by this governmentalism. Canadian Cedar governs for us, it's important for us, and for our cases, the Canadian Cedar governs the people of Southwestern Bangladesh by conducting Rupantar through Care Bangladesh. So Cedar governs Care governs Rupantar governs the people of Southwestern Bangladesh to shape, guide, and affect the conduct of all these people, so that these people are willingly, these people participate in their own governance.
Mm-hmm.
It instructs the possible field of action of these people by working through the interest generated from the peer factor. It is thus that the Western donors, INGOs and national NGOs, create the context for emergence of new form of neoliberal governmentalities that are transnational. There is another Bonshurakkar Podgan where I engage in another Podgan. This is Podgan on protection of forest, where I discuss how Rupantar performs another Podgan, which is totally silent on Rampal. This is a power plant located, being constructed some 14 kilometers north of the Sundarban forest. So this is Rampal area. This is where Bangladesh and India are collaborating to create a huge, I think, 1,350 megawatt power plant here. And this is Sundarban, very near Sundarban here. That this is a mangrove forest and is a World Heritage Site. Now, environmental activists in Bangladesh have protested against it. They condemned the water from this plant and the air pollution, and will heavily degrade the ecosystem of this forest, and will also affect the livelihoods of about 500,000 people who depend on this forest. But the government insists that the plant will actually develop the region, and Rupantar is absolutely silent on Rampal when it performs Podgan on Bonshurakkar, that is a protection of Sundarban forest. It is completely silent on Rampal. And this is where Rupantar's mission of building people's capacity to cope with the impacts of climate change and natural disaster is rendered on. I move into the fourth part, but I could pause here to take note of how we are doing.
Can I just add a fact in there as well in the
Yes.
to highlight the Canadian context? So
Yes.
Earlier there was the statistic that 24% of emissions are coming from the United States, and in fact, when you look at the proportion of the population of the US with Canada, it's the same amount of emissions that Canadians give. It's just that we have a smaller population, so we don't have 24%, but like per person, it's the same amount of emissions as the US. Just to contextualize.
Yeah. Okay. Would you like me to stop here and take up your questions, or do you want me to go to the fourth part, which is really theoretical discourse on what applied theater practitioners do, their intervention, the notion of intervention, and how they ignore really this neoliberal theatrics that is at work. Shall I go on, or would you like to? Do I move into your questions?
I think going on to the fourth part, because that's where some of the juicy provocations come in.
Sure,
so to have that basis sounds great. Thanks.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. All right. Right. So this is the fourth part, and here I discuss, of course, from the local. I look from the local to the global, and that this is not only in Bangladesh, and what the doing of applied theater does. Right. Rupantar has been performing this well-crafted, and mind you, this performance is fantastic. It really holds your spellbound, and this is much better than the traditional performance that we do. And this is very well crafted and popular performance since 1996. This is important. They have been doing this since 1996, and this, of course, I'm just reminding you, it is actively engaged in change that acts for neoliberal system, actually, finally, in the final account. Consequently, the performance is slipped as applied fiat tricks. So it's not fiat tricks, it's tricks by serving as localized assemblages of governmental techniques. And by that, again, I'm borrowing from Michel Foucault to remind you to attain active consent and willingness of individuals to participate in their own governance. And the performance is well-binding, the performance holds your interest, the performance rouses your interest. So it really engages you and it really succeeds in gaining your consent for your governance. For how long is another matter, but then it's a kind of feeling good all that you get once the performance ends. The governmental techniques attempt to produce hybridized and crystallized local specificity of neoliberal entrepreneurs of the self. So it's finally entrepreneurs of the self, that is self-care. So your enterprise as entrepreneurs, you're engaging yourself and you're taking care of the self, but these are hybridized and crystallized as locally specific. The people where it is taking place. So those people in southwestern Bangladesh, all over Bangladesh, where it is operating, these hybridized, crystallized local specificities of neoliberalism will be much different from what you have, of course, in Canada or the United States. These governmental techniques also attempt to produce these entrepreneurs of the self, and these entrepreneurs of the self are engaged in self-interested conduct as personal interest. And that is what they're trying to do. Rupantar slippage is a general trend, but it is not only Rupantar among NGOs in Bangladesh. I argue that Grameen Bank and BRAC also. BRAC is the largest NGO, and BRAC really, sometimes I really wonder whether BRAC operates really like another neoliberal tool. It operates all over in many parts of the world, in Africa and Asia, and even Latin America. BRAC as an NGO is just an international NGO now. So it has a huge funding, and Grameen Bank, of course, you know that it has its hugely important this microcredit funding. And BRAC also has microcredit borrowers means, but in a different manner. So both of them push neoliberal ideologies, and this is vitally important. That it is not because they are Bangladeshi NGOs that they are operating for, say, they are operating against neoliberalism or neocolonialism. They are actually operating as neoliberal tools, really, and to push neoliberal ideology. This is important. So it is not the West versus South. These financial instruments or this microcredit, they are a form of governmentality that is exercised by generalized control over people's behavior over their beliefs. So you are given this small credit, and people have made tremendous lot of change in Bangladesh. There's no doubt about it. Till before we have this huge amount of inflow of money from our overseas workers, migrant workers. Before that, microcredit in the 90s and even early 21st century, in the 80s and the 90s, microcredit worked as a batik in transforming the lives of the people. But then you see that transformation has worked at a cost. That what has worked is that this new liberal agendas have really proliferated and is at work now. The instruments also spread the values of entrepreneurship with the market as a solver of all else. So it is not social bonds that are important. It is not any kind of humanist bonds that are important now. It is what is important is the market, and what is important is value. How much money you earn from any kind of investment that you make. And you can also invest, you can also earn money from your mother, your brother, or anybody, or your partners, anybody. So what matters finally is the self-care and how much money you earn for yourself. It is not what an applied theater process stands for in terms of its constitutive elements. And this is what I think is very important. It is not how you construct your performance. It's not how your ideological tools or how your thought and what kind of structure you implement. Whether it is pot gun whether it is top-down or whether it is dialogic or whether it is forum theater. More importantly is that what your performance acts for. It is that which defines your performance's ethical control. And to define and to cognize that ethical control, I think it's very important. In cases discussed so far, applied theater has acted for neoliberalism. Now I move into another case, and here is, I move into Lesotho, or Winter Summer Institute, WSI, and Theater for Development by 4 universities from the United States, United Kingdom, and South Africa. They mobilized this WSI in Theater for Development, and they claimed they had huge success. Now, the objective is to challenge participants to create issue-based, aesthetically provocative, entertaining theater in rural mountain villages of Lesotho. In this performance, it's just you and me and my wife and your boyfriend, played in 2008. How they devised this performance was, first of all, they gathered and discussed information gathered from experts, NGOs active in the field of medical personnel, medical personnel and community activists, and they devised a theater piece by employing violin techniques, and tested the production for a local audience, and performed in rural villages in Lesotho, which are not exposed to theater or information on HIV/AIDS. And then they held a 5-day workshop in with those villages, and transferred the theatrical means of production knowledge and necessary to produce such plays for themselves. They trained the villages so that the villages can produce these plays by themselves. Now, WSI's theater making project is very different from, of course, Rupantar. It is not top-down. It is very participatory, both in devising phase and in the post-performance phase. It is marked, but what's important is it is marked by a deep divide between the TFD practitioners, the we, who come from outside, and the target population, they, for whom it is performed. The we hypocritically disavows that it is necessary to question if any of its members, the we members, could be infected, agree to the need to be tested, or disclose the HIV status. The we disavows this. And this is typically the case, as we found out when we performed applied theater in Dhaka University. When we performed for ourselves, we were doing it for ourselves. So it is necessary to make clear our position. But then when you go and perform for another person, and you're doing an HIV case, you're promoting HIV, you're promoting a performance that will work against HIV, spreading of HIV, then you do not disavow, you do not make it public that if any one of you have your HIV status. You assume that it could be with them, but not with you. And that's problematic. It raises the complex relationship between economic poverty and HIV/AIDS as bi-directional. The performance does not take this into cognizance. It also erases poverty as a key factor in transmission of HIV/AIDS in a country can impoverish people in such a way as to intensify the epidemic itself. So if you do not take into cognizance that poverty can be a key factor, and if you do not take into cognizance the complex relationship between economic poverty and HIV/AIDS, then what happens is neoliberal underpinnings, of course, slip in. And here for HIV performance, what happens is it relegates social responsibility to self-care. So finally, you perform, you transfer the means of theatrical production to those villages, and they perform it for themselves, and each of them are taught that it is our responsibility to take care of ourselves. Responses to AIDS in Lesotho, which is the 3rd highest HIV country in the world, 3rd highest HIV prevalence country in the world. The power relations underlying local and global discourses serve a neoliberal agenda because it depicts young people as individuals in need of saving. And this is what people from outside, the winter summer camp, that they're doing, that they're coming in to save young people as individuals who need to be saved. And they're transferring means of theater productions to them so that they develop personal autonomy and exercising individual rights. So at the end of a performance, there's an acceleration that we have attained voice. We have learned to see, we have attained our voice, and we can speak. We have autonomy. We exercise individual rights. And there I have a huge problem, because you are not taking care of the economic infrastructure. It is that which determines the superstructure. And that's a basic notion that I've picked up from Marxism, and which I think is very important, the economic infrastructure. How the economic infrastructure works, unless you take into cognizance that, you really cannot change the superstructure. Many applied theater practitioners do not acknowledge the process. And now, leaving that aside, what I'm moving into this another phase where I'm arguing that what I've argued so far, that I've shown you that how neoliberalism is at work. In Rupantur's case, in winter summer theater camp that is held by those universities, and also in Grameen Bank and other cases. But most applied theater practitioners do not take into cognizance that it is neoliberalism that we have to deal now. It is no longer North versus South. They believe that applied theater is an agency of intervention which can force its way into closed worlds to alter the dynamic of a static situation. And invariably, the agents of intervention come from the North because they're open, and they move into the South because they're all closed to alter the dynamics of a static situation. Because the South, countries like Bangladesh, it's all static situation. So they come as good Samaritans and to shake up the people and to imbibe them with this good faith. They also believe, and in most cases, with the best of intentions, that colonialism and its legacy of new colonialism induces passivity in the static situation of the closed world. So because we were colonized and because we are now under neo-colonial hegemony, it is because of these factors that these people are passive. In terms of Freire, it is that these people are dead and they do not respond anymore. Now, therefore, the conscientization is necessary. Hence, it is necessary to argue that it is necessary to mobilize these applied theater practitioners for the North belief, to mobilize the external involvement of a decolonizing agent, such as the facilitator of an applied theater process. And this is one of your questions. So, decolonizing agent would be an applied theater practitioner who would actually work to decolonize our mind. If I can borrow Ngugi wa Thiong'o's famous book, the decolonial hegemony, which is really working into in my mind or in my social setup, and remove those colonial or neo-colonial impediments and decolonize and by this applied theater process. They forget that we now live in a globalizing world, and there is the neoliberal project, which is becoming the norm. More than decolonization, it is what I'm arguing is that it is a neoliberal project that you have to work against. And they blindly assume, these practitioners from the North blindly assume that a divide exists between the capitalist West and the victims of colonialism, the South, South Asia, for example, and neo-colonialism and imperialism rest. So there is a deep divide between the West and the rest, and you have to come from the West and, of course, rescue us in the rest, in the South. But Rupantur in Bangladesh and WSI in Lesotho demonstrate that it is not colonialism, but neoliberalism that is at work. Here, the applied theater practitioners fail to comprehend that even if you're talking about neoliberalism, even if you're talking of cases where colonialism and neo-colonialism may still be at work, and it is definitely at work. Even if you're taking into cognizance that, and if you want to work in those areas of Bangladesh or India or Pakistan, you must realize that the people of the South who were mauled by colonialism, that they are not sacks of potatoes. They are not, their world is not static, despite what Marx says, Karl Marx says, that the peasants are sacks of potatoes and they're static, they can't think for themselves. So of course you need somebody from the outside to come and move them, of course, and therefore you need the party and the vanguard party. But the problem is here that you need to take into cognizance what James C. Scott speaks of, and that is infra-politics. What I'm arguing here is that the people of the South, whatever they are never sacks of believers. Even if there is a colonial and neo-colonial impediments at work over there, because there also at work is intra-politics. And intra-politics is something that the subaltern classes, the classes of the bottommost layer, that the farmers, that the peasants, the people who do not have access in moving upward in the ladder, in the social scale, that they mobilize into politics. And that perhaps the best example is, as James Scott says, this is Ethiopian proverb, that when the emperor passes, the peasant bows low, but at the same time farts silently. So, and thereby you mobilize into politics. So you bow and you do not openly challenge, but the farting is also there against the emperor. Intra-politics is enacted through discrete strategies and disguised efforts. So this is very important, that these people are not static, not immobile, but they are continuously, they are also engaging discrete strategies and disguised efforts. And they didn't, which strategies dare not speak its name. So they will not openly challenge the haves. The have-nots will never challenge the haves openly, but of course will challenge discreetly, like farting silently. Careful and evasive politics is intra-politics that avoids dangerous risks. It is a politics that is quite in keeping with reputation of the peasantry. For often you'll hear that they are very cunning, and it is aimed at minimizing or thwarting attempts at material appropriation of labor, production, and property by the dominant classes. And to stop dominant classes exploiting the subaltern classes. The subaltern classes employ or deploy intra-politics. Now, I also draw attention that this is the data of 2012, that over 50% farmers in countries such as Bangladesh, Vietnam, and China and India make arrangements for sale over mobile phones. So you understand that they also maintain network. It is not isolated villages that Marx cooked up somewhere in for India, that the Asiatic mode of production of isolated villages. These applied theater practitioners from the North fail to comprehend that the new liberal Homo economicus is at work. And this Homo economicus can be from any part of the world, can be from Bangladesh, can be from India, can be from the United States also. They fail to comprehend that when you're working now, the new liberal Homo economicus is at work, that is unceasingly accumulating capital spurred by only impersonal and abstract logic of cost-benefit calculations, erased of all identitarian markers, that is, you may be my brother or you may be my friend, and it is at work both in the West and the West. And by this, I mean this Homo economicus, I mean a hypothetical person who behaves in exact accordance with his or her rational self-interest, who attempts to maximize utility as a consumer and economic profit, as a producer by employing assessments. So if you do not take into this neoliberal Homo economicus at work, who is unceasingly accumulating capital, spurred only by impersonal and abstract logic of cost-benefit calculations, you will never begin to see how the world or the South, even the South works. You need to understand that the divide between North and South is breaking. China, India, Russia, and Brazil have emerged as respectively second. China is the second largest economy now. India is the fifth largest economy now. Russia is the ninth largest economy, and Brazil is the 11th largest economy by GDP. The new development bank set up by the BRICS, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa economies, is a sign that they're challenging World Bank and this multinational. But this is not a sign of new financial order. This is only a sign that the world economy is moving by the logic of Matsanai, that the justice in the world of fish, as described in South Asia, in political treatises of South Asia. By that I mean any big fish Any large financial capital that can be located in India or in South Africa or in Russia will attempt to outmaneuver those lesser to it in size. So somebody in Mittal in India can buy over a huge steel plant in the United Kingdom, UK now. We are all implicated in worldwide dealings of finance capital with which the neoliberal institutions ply the world market, because we are all engaged into a neoliberalism by the goods and services that we buy and sell. So at one end, you cannot really move out of it. Now, we need to realize that, the dream of the Marxist has already been subverted, I think, by neoliberals. The Marxists believe and propose that capital is not only personal. So if you're a capitalist, you have a huge amount of money, but it matters little unless you mobilize the money as a social instrument. You set up a mill and you run the mill. So thereby it becomes a social power. So capital is not only personal power, but also is a social power. Now the Marxists believe, Marx and Engels believe that change in the social character of capital, gradually from personal, it'll be more social, will inevitably convert the property of all members of society. So capital will be in all members for all members of the society. So it'll be a classless society finally, the Marxist dream. But the process has already largely been subverted by neoliberal projects of encoding social domain as a form of economic domain. So social domain no longer gradually is being erased, and the social domain is being recoded as the economic domain. By this logic, cost-benefit calculations and market criteria are being applied to decision-making processes within the family, married life, professional life, and everywhere, gradually. So if this political project of neoliberalism succeeds, there'll be no discrete and identifiable firms, producers, households, consumers, fathers, mothers, criminals, immigrants, natives, adults, children, or any other fixed category of human subjectivity. There'll only be heterogeneous human capital, distinct in their specific attributes, abilities, natural endowments, and skills. And by human capital, I mean specifically this. So every human being possesses human capital, that is intangible assets of qualities, the skills, knowledge, education, training, intelligence, and experience possessed by an individual or population, viewed in terms of their value or cost in an organization or in a country. So finally, neoliberalism will reduce you in terms of human value. In a university, you'll be reduced in terms of human capital as to, your paper, your promotion or whatever will be judged by the paper and how many people are accessing that, and your ranking in terms of that, and thereby your intelligence or your skill will be evaluated. So finally, it's a matter of human capital, and that is what neoliberalism is really is at work. For many applied theater practitioners from the North, the assumed divide between the West and the rest makes which makes their condition of theater to work. That you come from the North and you work in the South. The North versus the South, that really doesn't work anymore. Because you really have to understand that now applied theater practitioners who are ceaselessly working to dismantle the distance between the West and the rest are impervious to the actuality that they have to constitute the distance itself in the attempt of suppressing the distance. Now, by this, I mean, I'm of course quoting from Jean-Pierre Rancière, where he speaks of the emancipated spectator. Now, briefly, in the pedagogical process, the role of the schoolmaster is posited as the act of suppressing the distance between the knower, between his knowledge and the ignorance of the knowledge of the student, the ignorant student. Of course, here I'm not. This is not Paulo Freire. So, schoolmaster is the knowledgeable person, and the student is ignorant. His lesson, the schoolmaster's lesson, exercises are aimed at continuously reducing the gap between knowledge and ignorance. Unfortunately, of course, this his should be also her. Unfortunately, in order to reduce the gap, he or she has to reinstate it ceaselessly. In order to replace ignorance by the adequate knowledge, he must always run one step ahead of the ignorant who loses his ignorance. I hope you understand that. You see, that's what the applied theory practitioner from the North would be doing. If they want to dismantle the distance between North and the South, they have to create the distance, and they have to maintain the distance so that they can dismantle it. And always run a step ahead so that they can keep creating the distance so that they can dismantle or suppress that distance. Applied theory practitioners to radically shift their epistemology need to radically shift their perspective and invite them to apply their artistry and skill in theater as storytellers. And this is what I think is important. That applied theater practitioners need to radically shift their epistemological perspective. That it is not the North from the North against the South. It is not the colonial and neo-colonial hegemony that is at work, but it is neoliberalism that is at work. And I would invite them to apply their artistry and skill in theater as storytellers, any form of storytelling. They would need to adapt. You tell stories, and why I can explain later on. You need to adopt to the ambiguous and liminal attributes of the trickster. You need to be who works in the spirit of disorder and enemy of the boundaries. A trickster, and to challenge neoliberalism, you need to be a trickster. You need to be a spirit of disorder, and you need to cross boundaries. And you need also to remember that those ethical norms work for the haves more, or neoliberal ideology more. If you're clear that by challenging these norms, by ethical boundaries, you're really subverting neoliberalism. If you can really work in that complex structure, then perhaps what you can do is as trickster-esque storytellers. Of course, without your development and intervention package. That is what I mean, that you're not going anywhere to develop, you're not going anywhere to intervene, but you're engaging in a dialogue and as a trickster. And as a trickster, you tell stories. And then as trickster telling stories, what you're doing is you're engaging in play. And by play, I mean subverting the boundary. By play, I mean challenging the norm. By play, I mean challenging the structured process that society constantly applies on us. By play, I mean the breaking away from ritual. Ritual can be, of course, daily life rituals too. So by play, I mean not for serious activities that challenge the limits and the boundaries of any kind of structure. And they should operate as shadow warriors, not as actual warriors. They should operate as shadow warriors, kagemusha, borrowing from Japan, of course. And then as shadow warriors, you don't need to be a huge warriors and shed your life. You run away. You play as a trickster. They should not be able to catch you. And you need to recognize that both storytelling and play retain a dangerous harmlessness. A harmlessness. Storytelling is harmless. Play is also harmless. You can always claim that I'm playing, and this should answer one of your questions. But it is dangerous because the play, by claiming to be harmless, can really challenge your boundary. By the story, by claiming to be harmless, can be dangerous because it can dismantle your structure and your ways of thinking by providing alternate visions of the world, perhaps. For neither the storyteller nor the play, neither storytelling and play know no fear. They know no fear because you're telling a story, fine, and you're playing. There's nothing to be afraid of in storytelling and in playing. So in playing as a trickster, the applied theater practitioner turned storyteller could seek to subvert the neoliberal project of encoding the social domain as a form of the economic domain. By working as shadow warriors, these tricksterous playing of the applied theater practitioner, they could work alongside the subaltern classes to tell stories. These tricksterous playing of the applied theater practitioners could work to tell stories so that the self-care can be revisioned as social care. That is important for me. Thank you for bearing with me for so long.
Thank you so much. Oh, such engaging provocations. Love it. So we had a series of questions that I was able to show you prior to us beginning.
Yes.
I guess, would you mind if I throw in a quick question to start? Okay.
Oh, not at all. First of all, I'm a little concerned, not for me, but about you. I've already taken 1 hour, 20 minutes. So I don't want to force you. So, it's up to you. If you want to start.
Well, people, yeah, I know we have just about 10 minutes left, but I just have one, because in your very final statement, you speak about being alongside the subaltern classes. So there is still an element of working with folks who have been marginalized in some way. How that doesn't go against what you're saying in terms of the savior complex that accompanies many applied theater practitioner ideologies. But it also necessitates that the stories are coming from people with lived experience of the fact that they have to be the tricksters themselves in order to do everyday resistance, like the infrapolitics you're talking about. So do you think there still is some responsibility to make sure that applied theater is engaging with folks, as you're saying, of the subaltern classes, that is an element that is needed?
Yes. I think I should add, I should add specifically here also the fact that I still subscribe to Freirean notion of dialogue.
Yeah.
So once you have this Freirean notion of dialogue in play, I don't think the savior complex can work here. So it is not that you're trying to save anybody. I engage into dialogue, and hopefully, if not today, maybe another session somewhere else or anytime, challenging dialogue, because that challenges me to think anew. I've not come here to teach. I've come here to work with you, to talk to you, or to dialogue with you, so that I stay fresh here with you in terms of your questions. So, it's not that I'm trying to teach anybody. So in the same way, when you're working with the subaltern classes, it is dangerous. And if you ask me right now, I'll have to give up a lot of things. So this is a challenge for me too. But then if you can work with the subaltern classes as a quick start, if you can play and if you can tell stories, and then if you can engage in dialogue, through these, you can discover and develop how self-care can be transformed into social care. And I think that is important, that it is not, we, each of us fend for ourselves, but we fend for ourselves.
Great. Thank you.
Does that answer your question or no?
Yes, I was just thinking of it in the context of what our class is doing is in working with folks who are refugees and immigrants, that it's not in the sense of us going in to be saving them, but rather to learn collectively about ways that we can be mutually in service to each other.
Yes. What I'll tell you then is you, I, and all your students, all of you, what we can do, what you're grooming yourselves into, and what I've groomed myself into is theater practice. This is what you have as theater practitioners. So as theater practice, or if you have multiple disciplines there too. In terms of whatever discipline you have, theater provides you an option that this is one mode of dialogue that you can engage in. And by employing theater as a dialogical tool, and strictly as a dialogical tool, and I think Boal, of course, is very dangerous, where you begin to play as a joker. But then, you maneuver. But then, if you're strictly engaged in whatever discipline you're from, if you take up theater as a tool for dialogue, you're constantly learning from the people. And the people, if you're going to work with the refugees, you're taking their stories, you're learning from them, and these stories are reshaping, and they're challenging you, and you revision your world, and you relearn all that you have learned. So as long as that motive is very clear for you, that I'm here to work with you, to learn from you, as in a dialogue process. And what I can give you in return is, of course, my skill as theater, and of course to organize you, or even if I have other skills too, and to mobilize you in seeing that whether we can change your situation in whatever way possible. Does that make sense?
Yes. Fabulous. So I don't know if you'd like to return to any of the questions that were that you were able to look at prior to this,
Yes,
particularly engaging to you, perhaps.
I don't know. By looking at the faces, I see not much of interest or enthusiasm, or maybe it's very cold in Canada right now, and it's not very cold here. Incidentally, right now, today is the 10th day of Durga Puja. So beside me is a Hindu hall for the Hindu students, and they're playing the drum. The whole university.
Oh, really?
They're playing the drum and they're playing music. And Durga, this is the goddess, will be there's Visarjan is taking place now. So there's a celebration here.
That's beautiful.
And, yeah, so that context is working here for us. And winter is just setting in here. It's still not chilly, and it's not hot, and the rains have disappeared. But if it is not the similar context for you, we can stop. Or I can take a question. I mean, it's not my problem. But I see that, you know, you are kind of all yeah, smiling now, but not smiling since. It was not my intention to to challenge you in any way but intellectually. I wanted to challenge you intellectually. So if I've spoken against the North, I'm not cutting you down or in any way, or I'm not, you know, diminishing anybody's importance. Please don't misunderstand me. Anyway, so first question that I have is, neoliberalism is mentioned many times in this meeting. What is the broadest sense and how does it affect our society compared to Eastern society? First of all, I would like to break Eastern and Western. The world doesn't work like this anymore, really. So the world is getting, I mean, there's of course globalization working in numerous ways, despite what Donald Trump claims, and despite what your Prime Minister may be trying to do in whatever way, in trying to protect Canada or the United States way. People, even perhaps without the United States and Canada, will be working. So it is not the Eastern and Western anymore. These binaries don't work. And since Edward Syed, of course, where does the West begin? I would like to question you. And where does the East begin? This is another question. It's not the Suez Canal. It's not Asia. And if you remember, Russia is cut by Europe, and Asia is divided. So it is both in Asia and Europe. So let's not talk about Eastern and Western societies. Let us talk about specificities, specific places, and specific cases. And so how does it work? It works in various ways. I mean, this is what I will try to show you. So taking this example, CEDA funds somebody in an NGO in Bangladesh indirectly, and they do a play, they do a performance, and that performance imbibe people to take care of themselves. Or in any other way in daily life, constantly these things are happening. So there may be a promotion in the government. So, or maybe this play that I'm doing. So in this play that we are trying to do, despite this COVID-19, we are running against time. So we have to perform before the second wave COVID-19 sets into Bangladesh. Mm-hmm. Now to do that, we need money. To do that, we need funding. So maybe we can get funding from some multinational in Bangladesh. But to do that, that company will dictate some terms for us. But so, now you see already neoliberalism is setting in. We are selling, we are buying and selling in terms of market value. How much we can sell our play for, and thereby how we'll market the play to get the money back, and forgetting the fact that we are trying to do the play for many people, and many people may not be able to afford the kind of ticket price that we'll be doing. So neoliberalism case is at work anywhere now, at any place, anytime, where you'll be told that you have to take care of yourself, where you'll be told that it is not the duty of the government. Obamacare is not important. When anybody is telling you that neoliberalism is at work, because the state, the government or the state really has a lot of safety nets. And this was the old school of thinking of economics. That is the duty of the government to take care of the people. So you have safety nets in terms of health, like Obamacare or other issues. So anybody who gets old, that the state pays pension to that money, so that person can take care of himself. Now, neoliberalism will, of course, erase all the safety nets and will increasingly tell you that it is your responsibility. In return, neoliberalism will tell you that, you see, it is very beneficial because if you're rich, why should you be paying money for Obamacare or any kind of government subsidy? Because you can buy things, better things for yourself. Your money will be deducted. So, or you'll be told that if the government is providing you an absolutely level playing field, which is bunkum, which never happens. In one way or the other, the haves or the affluent will find a way. And you have found numerous circumstances of even last year, where you found that, you know, the people who have plenty of money bought their ways into the Ivy League university. Mm-hmm. So these things happen, but of course, much less in the West and much openly in countries like Bangladesh. So, but you'll be told that the level field, the playing field is level. You earn your merit and you work, as it is being told in Singapore and increasingly in Bangladesh too. So I don't think there'll be local specificities, of course, specific cases. In Bangladesh, it will work in certain ways, of course. In Europe, it will work in another case. But basically, what we'll be telling you is that no government safety nets. You depend on the market and personal care, self-care. No social care, self-care is important. It's 8:30.
Oh, it is 10:30, so I want to make sure that if people have to go, yeah, if you have to scoot, then you scoot. I know there's one more question that if you're able to say, just to answer this, it's being recorded, but it's about how to use theater in education for people who are very closed-minded or who are very who benefit from the neoliberal system and are very resistant when offering these new ideas or looking at these increasing our value of the social over the individual or the economic. So how I think that's something that a lot of folk that we talk about a lot is what do we do with those closed-minded folks and as educators.
First of all, right, okay, but tell me if I'm not answered your question. Sometimes I kind of, that is why I needed that PowerPoint, because I veer off in different directions. Tell me if I've not answered your question. Right. Firstly, what we tend to do mostly is scratch each other backs. We play for those who have accepted, who agree with us. We are applauded by the people who are already thinking like us. In most of the cases. You see, so by that I mean, you see, when you're doing a play, only the people who think like you will come and see your play. People who do not think like you will not come and see. And this is my problem, though. I'm not saying that this is only others' problem. I'm outside the problem. So I'll be applauded by the people who think like us. I'm answering a question, actually. So by this, I mean that, first of all, you need to engage in dialogue. And second of all, you need to understand that everybody have their own good reason for thinking in whatever way reason that person can be thinking. You're talking of somebody neoliberal. I can think of somebody who is extreme right IS in Bangladesh, say, and IS is banned here in Bangladesh. So how do you engage with these people who really bomb and who kill people and create havoc in the name of Allah, and Allah really hasn't said those things, and misinterpret Quran and by quoting partially? How do you deal with them? By first of all accepting the fact that this person is as intelligent as I am, and I have to convince the unconvinced, not the convinced. How do I convince the unconvinced? And by engaging with this person and listening intently. And I think that is very important. So if I listen to these people, I begin to understand their fear factors, where fear plays very heavily on them, and where they are very, very, very afraid, very keenly hanging on to a thread that, you know, their identity is at risk, that they'll no longer remain a Muslim, that they'll be subsumed by this huge machine called India and Hinduism. So those things are at work. or America will subsume my identity as a Muslim. So it is there that you need to understand and engage in a language that these people will understand, and also convince me. Maybe that same fear factor is somewhere lurking in my mind. Acknowledge that. And for you, the new liberal hardliner, who may be thinking in that kind of term, and then accept it, and then try and see that what logic this person can have and what logic you have. You engage in a dialogue. You don't try to convince by your line. You try to convince by the line that this person is taking up, and providing counter argument. And you need to take the risk. Then maybe this other person is right. Maybe I'm wrong. So in a dialogue, if you don't take that risk, it becomes pseudo dialogue. But if you're taking that risk, and if you're really actually listening to this other person and seeing the logic of this other person, you will see that, that you'll be challenging your logic, and then you'll be forced to come out with another logic to see that it is not self, but us is important. So neoliberalism finally works in terms of the self, that it promotes the notion that self-care is vital. It promotes the notion that the market is important, that you work very hard and you will reap the benefit of your hard labor by whatever you do. And this is the American dream that you're talked of. But then, you know, this is all bogus. This is all, trap. I have been to the United States. I've stopped there twice, and I've traveled by Greyhound bus from the East Coast to the West Coast, stopping in all major regional centers, seeing theater, and interacting with people on Greyhound buses also. I've seen how poverty works also, and I've seen how blacks work also, and I've seen how the marginalized people work over there also. So this all beautiful American dream doesn't work. And if you read a play like All My Sons, this is Arthur Miller, or if you read a play like View from the Bridge, you understand how, or a play like Death of a Salesman, Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, you see how the American dream is all crap. In many cases, and you are really trying to recycle this hegemonic tool, so that, you know, we are all on the same page and we work. This is, of course, governance. The state is really governing you indirectly. You believe that you are free, but of course you are being manipulated. It is ridiculous to talk of Russia, Soviet Union, and the manipulation that Stalin did, because that is quite open. If you ask me, I think what is happening is, of course, this manipulation, ideological manipulation, that is much worse. And by that, I don't mean that I'm not being manipulated too. We are all being manipulated at one level or the other. And that is important to understand. Have I answered your first question, or have I sidestepped it?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for staying on a little bit longer, you and everyone else. I
can stay as long as you want me to stay. I'm fine with it, but I don't want to hold you. So,
yeah,
you know, if you tell them to go.
Sadly, I have to let the students go, but I have another question for you just for myself, but I will let the students go though, because I know you have a lot going on. And we're reconvening later on today at 2:45, so that I can prepare everybody for our engagement with community at 4, which you don't have to worry about because I'll facilitate. Cool? Okay. Mwah. Bye, darlings. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. No. Do you have a question? Do you want to engage further? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I do. So something that I've been looking at a lot is how applied theater could support social movements that are grassroots leftist social movements. I'm wondering how that could intersect with your idea of the power of theater being in its dangerous harmlessness, the play element, if it's overtly used in the context of social movements, like, for instance, doing invisible theater alongside a protest, or, you know, like intertwining it with direct action tactics. Because it seems like it's a different route than where you're going, but I'm just curious what you think of in terms of applied theater and social movements combining.
Anything that works,
Yeah.
I'm fine. I mean, I'd welcome it. I mean, anything that works against neoliberalism. This is one way of doing it. Maybe there's another way. And I think grassroots level activism is very important, vitally. And we had this wonderful experience in Bangladesh in 2014, where social media played a very vital role also. So grassroots movement, yes, keen. And anyway, there's I mean, applied theater can mobilize grassroots, fine, absolutely. But my question, my initial reservation would be on this prime factor that we convince the convinced. We do not convince the unconvinced.
Right.
That is, I think, my issue here. We need to find ways of engaging with people who do not agree with us. And grassroots movement really gathers people. So how does it gather? To gather a motion in a movement, you need to get people to agree to key issues, ideas, notions. So so the key slogans that become important, and by those key slogans, you get to gather people. Now, I think what is important in theater, and I think here this notion of theater is important. That in theater or in any art, when you're talking of, when you're mobilizing a notion, it can be very abstract and at the same time concrete. So by this I mean that when you're talking of, say, your country in a performance, you're not, of course, showing the entire country, but the images and the symbols of country that you're bringing up, or the symbols of democracy that you bring up, they're so fluid that they're so accommodating that they can bind people together. So I think it's important to find notions, symbols, which are fluid in accommodating diverse ideas, so that multiple people from diverse angles can coalesce around that notion, an idea. So theater needs to mobilize such open notions, open abstract notions of movement or any ideology. So and I mean, you understand. I mean, but by this I mean, so even if it is class struggle. So class struggle, if it is class struggle or grassroots movement or democracy that you're trying to mobilize, democracy should be mobilized in such an abstract and encompassing manner that it is just not a word, but it is emotion, it is ideas, it is multiple images that play around playfully.
Okay.
You understand what I mean? So that attracts. So and it has to be skillful. If a performance is skillful, performance can attract notion. But if you're not skilled in performing, and that is what podcast performers do. They sing well, they dance well. They are not, they have not lost their voice and stuff like that. Many of the indigenous performers do not sing because they have taken performance over from the indigenous theater. And they're mobilizing them to sing well, dance well, and it is well crafted. So if it is well crafted, if you can bring up this issue in a manner that this notion is symbolic, the notion is all encompassing, the notion does not exclude, the notion includes. Yeah. Then you can build around it. So by this I mean, I'll give you a specific example. In Bangladesh, when we were independent, there were 4 key factors which are very important for us. One was because we broke away from Pakistan and we were avowedly against religion. So we mobilized this notion of secularism. So secular notion of the state. Secularism was one of the 4 key founding ideas behind Bangladesh. Others were democracy, socialism, and of course other things. But secularism was very important. Now, secularism was translated as dharma nirapakshata, that is neutral in terms of religion in Bangla. That became hugely problematic for those people who were deeply religious,
Right.
Islamists.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So this was not opened up. This was an intellectual idea, hugely important intellectual idea. This idea did not permeate down to the grassroots level in a manner that they could interpret it, and it wasn't welcoming. It was telling them that you need to debunk your religion.
Right. Right.
So anybody. I mean, even if you're secular, at one point, I think, and whoever is very secular, at one point, you have some kind of religious notion working in you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like when I'm dead or my father is dead, however secular I am, I would like him to bury him in a manner.
Right.
In however least Islamic manner, he has to be buried. I mean, I cannot throw the body away, however secular I am. Thereby, at one level, at certain level, however secular you are, some level of religion plays into you. So you cannot really debunk religion completely. And that's what we try to do, forgetting that 99% of the people in Bangladesh, for them, religion is very important. And at that time, I didn't realize. But now I realize how religion plays. Because I was brought up in an Islamic family, I realized that even if my father was not deeply Islamic, I know that how Islamic values work in me. And how I see, for somebody else, for you, or for you, I can see Christian values working in you, but maybe you do not see, you see Muslim, Islamic values working in me. These we cannot completely overcome in first generation. Maybe 10th generation, maybe we can overcome, or maybe we can overcome by, by genetic engineering. But that's what I'm trying to say. So in 1971, if he had performed, if he had put up performances of what secularism is, and if he had opened up a huge dialogue around this and played around this notion of secularism by means of symbol, which would invite people, not exclude them.
Right, right.
Then perhaps we would have won. Then perhaps we wouldn't have had the problem that we are facing now.
Mm.
We are facing this huge problem because in 1971, there was Islamism was nowhere to be seen. But by 1975, it's creeping back in.
Yeah.
And by 2002, there was a tiny Islamic revolution in North. See, and this is something I can't imagine in 71. We couldn't imagine. So this is, I think, what needs to be done, even at a grassroots level, to invite people, to find ways of not excluding and engaging in dialoguing, and in understanding that other person, however different opinion that person may have, has something very important to teach you. In terms of dialogue, something that I haven't seen. And I know this is difficult, and I'm not trying to say that I do this myself. I get impatient very frequently. I get deeply impatient when people do not, see differently. So I'm deeply in this problem, but I see this problem. And if I could perhaps overcome this, I would be an angel, and I would be able to do what I did. But I think this needs to be done, even in myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's where I come from too, is I have a very difficult time not, leaping towards standing up for justice when I hear something. So my goal is not always let's find a common value, but is like hard not to just shut down the idea. But what worries me so much right now is the extremity of the backlash, of the level of violence of the backlash to some of these ideas, looking at how white supremacy is playing out in the States right now and in Canada and such places, that is there even a point to trying to start that dialogue with certain folks, or is it about mobilizing everyone who's recognizing how dangerous that is? You know what I mean?
I know, but that is finally the task. Otherwise, we are just convincing the convinced.
Right.
We have to convince the unconvinced.
Right.
And we have to understand that first of all, I think, like your white supremacists, we have the Islamists here, hidden Islamists, who will not speak openly. But I see fear factor. I think one is fear factor, and the other is, your resources are being squeezed up. Limited resources. You can be open. In the 70s, you're open. So there wasn't this white supremacy in the 70s, maybe, or in the 80s, because there were plenty of resources. But the United States has found out the Canada has found out that, by globalization, it's not only your benefit, you're also, the other person will be benefiting. And if the other person benefits, of course, your resources will be squeezed. And if your resources are squeezed, then of course it hurts. And when it hurts, you start screaming. So find out where their resources are hurting them, where their resources are being squeezed, and find out where they're scared. Finally, it's scared.
Get the interest convergence that they talk about in critical race theory, right? Yeah.
So maybe you can find a way out from there.
Yeah.
But without convincing the unconvinced, we'll go nowhere. That was the problem with the leftists, and all left-leaning movements. We are convincing the unconvinced finally. We are talking among ourselves. We are not moving out, and we think that they're all crap, they're all stupid, and we're all intelligent. We understand, they don't understand. So it's not possible to talk to them. That is the first mistake that we need.
Yeah. Well, thank you for continuing to talk with me now.
Not at all. Take care, and I loved it very much. It was very interesting. Your students were very silent. I would like to know if I really heard them, shut them up, or I've been able to trigger some thoughts, pro, against, whatever. It's not that you have to agree.
Yeah, they enjoy the critique because they're very critical as well. They just want to learn more and more about, they want to learn more of the theory and the dynamics, and like they know about neoliberalism to some degree, but hearing it articulated, especially in the context of applied theater being problematic, I think really would open their eyes more. I think it's just that they're tired and that
whatever. Okay.
Not that they're offended. They're not offended. Timid.
One reason I found it difficult to teach in the United States was I couldn't, even in England, I couldn't